Voters in the Lyme Central School District overwhelmingly passed a multi-million-dollar capital project Tuesday. 119 yes votes to 18 no's. 7 News reporter Sandy Torres tells us what it entails.
The hallways at Lyme Central School District are nearly a century old. So are the roofs and the windows. Superintendent Patricia Gibbons says it's time for an upgrade to that infrastructure.
Yeah, it's a beautiful building. It just needs some tender, loving care, for sure.
Tuesday, folks were voting on a capital improvement project for the school district.
Couldn't have been easier, Pat.
Jane Collins lives in Lyme and says this is a good thing for the community.
Well, my mother was the valedictorian and graduated from here. She's now 95 years old. I have nieces and nephews who attend this school. They're very young, and I'm sure they will be living in this community for years to come.
The cost of the proposed project is $7.5 million, $1 million from the district's reserve fund, and $6.5 million from state building aid. Gibbons says the project will not increase people's taxes.
Definitely some much needed work done to have a better atmosphere for not only our teaching staff, but also our students as well.
Some of that work includes getting the roof fixed, upgrading the HVAC and plumbing, also upgrading the wheelchair lift in the lobby. Something else that needs a makeover, the gym. Gibbons says some boilers and propane tanks also need attention. The superintendent says the next step for the project is getting state approval. Once that happens, she hopes they can break ground in summer 2025. Sandy Torres, 7 News.